You won't believe what recently shattered the world of hip-hop and love. Rumors of a DNA bombshell have surfaced, and Karlie Redd is at the center of the issue. Has been discovered his apparent paternity claim is now being questioned, leaving followers in surprise. Karlie allegedly waved evidence in Rasheeda's face and insisted that the truth be exposed before the next season's filming began. Emotions were running high. Emotions intensified when Rasheeda, who had always spoken up for her family's reputation, said she would not be silent. Her husband's reputation was shattered in public. Imagine a furious yet sad Karlie facing Kirk Frost in a passionate confrontation. That left everyone in wonder. The family was split, with several backing Kirk's impassioned denials and others backing Karlie's daring claims. One question remains, as producers scramble to record every emotional moment for future episodes: is this another dramatic twist or the largest treachery in the climax? Rasheeda thundered, "If you lied about your own blood, what else are you concealing from me and us?" Her voice trembled between wrath and incredulity, and onlookers are kept on the edge of their seats as alliances break down. Cameras look behind closed doors. Things will never be the same when this DNA drama bursts, so buckle your seatbelt, as Kirk Frost's quivering fingers lingered over the DNA report papers. Fluttering like a frenzied pulse, the room went quiet in awe. With her arms clasped and her eyes ablaze with vindication, Karlie Redd stood her position, as Rasheeda watched the situation unfold in front of her, her heart hammering against her ribs and her pulse thundering in her ears. Cameras were warned to record every instant of the silence that hung between them, of a happy ending they had made. Together now seemed like an unstable house of cards, with every secret threatening to destroy it. Is this Karlie's soft but accusing voice? Penetrated the atmosphere. Is this what you've been concealing? She pointed to the lab seal with her finger as she held out the first page. The weight of the proof knocked Kirk Frost out of his usual bravado, leaving his face empty of color. His lips parted in protest as he swallowed, but the words never came. Instead, he glanced at the news as if he was wishing it away with a wailing voice. Rita walked forward with glittering eyes. Kirk's jaw clenched as she replied, "Kirk Frost, tell me it's not real. Tell me that you told the truth about our child." Perspiration trickled down his brow, his eyes filled with guilt and embarrassment as he shook his head, and his voice was hardly more than a croak as he said, "I believed I was protecting us." Karlie laughed bitterly and softly. "Are you keeping us safe?" she said, taking a step nearer. "What do you mean by deception protection?" Her laser-like glance at Kirk Frost highlighted all of his flaws. The workers behind her glanced at each other in astonishment as viewers at home assaulted the live chat with incredulous remarks. Social media alerts burst. Fans are horrified. One comment read, "The family was left split." Another added, "You falsify the results before presenting them to Rasheeda." Karlie raised her voice. "You switched the labels and adjusted the numbers. Are you aware of what that implies?" Desperation flashed in Kirk's eyes. He tried to what it meant, but his voice stuttered, with tears on the edge. Rita attempted to preserve her calm as her breast heaved. She took a brief peek at the sealed envelope that held Kirk's initial test that Karlie had already created the proof for. Was now evident to everyone. Rita's younger sister stepped there with a phone in hand when there was a quick tap on the door. With a trembling voice she proclaimed. Rita lingered close by, jittery as if divided between desiring the truth and fearing about its ramifications. The thunder of her pulse was echoed by the calm hum of the production lights as her heart raced. She loved Kirk Frost with all of her heart, but the notion that he had cheated on her hurt more than any betrayal she could have imagined. Kirk Frost said, his voice wavering like a ship in rough waters, "What's the point of exposing this tonight?" His question hung in the air, heavy with sorrow, and Karlie's response was a measured breath followed by a precisely placed arrow. Her voice was hushed, unyielding, as she indicated, "Because I waited until every stone was unturned. I verified the authenticity of the lab, verified each signature, and followed chain of possession." "You've gone far enough with your falsehoods." Rita walked ahead, her eyesight obscured by a veil of tears. "Kirk Frost," she whispered with a cracking voice. "Discuss anything so sacred, please." As he reached for the envelope, Kirk's palm trembled. Touching the paper like a man nearing a crevice, he halted and briefly closed his eyes, perhaps preparing himself for the impending blow. He exhaled resignedly and lifted the cover and pulled out the top sheet, his eyes flying over the lab seal, proclaiming legitimacy in the hush that followed. The sound of paper rustling was overbearing. Kirk's eyes widened. As he scanned the written facts, his knuckles turned white. Rita held her breath, anxiety constricting every muscle in her body. Finally, Kirk's shoulders sagged as the reality destroyed his years of assurance. "It's real," he murmured in a hoarse voice. "I'm not the father, I promise." The gathered bystanders gave out a collective scream. Others raised their fingers to their mouths in wordless horror, while others grabbed their phones even more tightly, their thumbs lingering over the record buttons. Cameras weird capture the steely determination in Karlie's attitude, the sheen of tears at Rita's eyes, and the twitch of Kirk's lip. Social media was overwhelmed with shocked replies from followers who were watching at home. "Fans are astonished, the family was divided, and I can't believe Kirk Frost would do this." They typed fast. Karlie took the chance. She drew out a flash drive from her bag. She went over to a laptop that was waiting, put it in, and then clicked once to display the contents onto a giant screen. Lines of text scrolling across. Kirk Frost and an unidentified accomplice exchanged precisely designed phony texts, one of which said to replace the genuine with the doctored report while no one was watching. Ensure that Rita never sees the unmodified effects. There was no place for doubt because of the frigid, calculating tone of the chats, which stung like a kick to the stomach. Rita's knees, she dropped into the couch, her lips covered by a palm that muffled her screams as he attempted to converse. Kirk's voice, which had previously been so powerful on reality TV, shattered. He faltered, "I thought I was protecting you. I never intended for you to suffer harm." His admission seemed thin in front of the pile of facts. Rita's sister stepped from the crowd, clutching the envelope closely and astonished with a voice quivering from the gravity of her admission. She stated, "There's more." She supplied her own evidence, including recordings of private conversations, in which Kirk Frost expressed his worry that the truth may alienate Rasheeda, and text messages from his ex-lover. Kirk's own voice said, "I am frightened she will leave me if she finds out the truth." As the tape played over the speakers, every pause while the debris settled, the room appeared to be trapped in time, as if the air itself was immovable in a wordless confession in Kirk's consciousness. Lowering as tears poured down his cheeks, Rita peered at him with a mix of wrath and anguish in her eyes. "How could you make up something about our child?" she sobbed. "How could you build your entire life on lies?" Karlie approached Rita and put out a helping hand. "You are deserving of the truth," she said gently. For a little the instant the two women made an alliance forged in the fire of treaty. Rasheeda seized the hand. The unity in their clasped hands was recorded by the cameras, generating a powerful image that would come to in the most explosive moment of the season. Another bombshell dropped just when it looked that all the secrets had come to light. Rita received a sealed package from a private investigator. Alongside a production assistant, Rita stayed close by, uneasy as if caught between desiring the truth and concerned about its consequences. The thunder of her pulse was mirrored by the gentle buzz of the production lights rushed through her heart. She loved Kirk Frost with all of her heart, but the prospect that he had cheated on her was more devastating than any betrayal she could have imagined. Kirk Frost said, his voice wavering like a ship in rough waters, "What's the point of exposing this tonight?" His question hung in the air, heavy with sorrow. A planned breath followed by a carefully directed arrow was Karlie's reaction. Her voice was calm but resolute as she added, "Because I waited until every stone was unturned, I validated the validity of the lab, validated each signature, and traced the line of custody. You've gone too far with your falsehoods." Rita went ahead, her eyesight obscured by a curtain of tears. "Kirk Frost," she murmured with a broken voice, "tell me it's not true. Don't lie to me about something so holy, please." Kirk's palm trembled as he reached for the envelope, skimming the paper. Like a man approaching a precipice, he paused and briefly closed his eyes, perhaps bracing himself for the imminent blow. He sighed resignedly, then raised the cover and drew out top page. His eyes darted over the lab seal, proclaiming legitimacy in the hush that followed. The sound of paper rustling was deafening. Kirk's eyes widened in disbelief as he scanned his hands turned white. And Rita held her breath, panic gripping every muscle in her body. Finally, Kirk's shoulders collapsed as the truth sank the assurance he had held for years. "It's real," he muttered in a hoarse voice. "I'm not the father, I promise." Onlookers pulled out a collective scream. Others raised their fingers to their mouths in wordless terror, while others grabbed their phones even more firmly, their thumbs lingering over the record buttons they were, catching the steely determination in Karlie's attitude, the sheen of tears at Rita's eyes, and the twitch of Kirk's lip. Social media was overwhelmed with astonished replies from followers who were watching at home. "Fans are stunned, and I can't believe Kirk Frost would do this," they typed fast. Karlie Redd seized the moment and pulled out a flash drive from her handbag. She moved over to a laptop that was waiting, plugged it in, and then clicked. Once the contents were shown onto a large screen, lines of letters scrolled over perfectly, crafted phony messages between Kirk Frost and an unnamed accomplice one. He told to replace the original with the doctored report when no one is watching to ensure that Rita never sees the unmodified results. There was no room for question because of the frigid, calculated tone of the chats. It struck like a strike in the stomach. Rita's legs gave way and she slumped into the sofa, her lips covered by a hand that muffled her sobs as he sought to talk. Kirk's voice, which had previously been so authoritative on reality TV, shattered. He faltered, "I believed I was protecting you. I never intended for you to suffer pain." His admission sounded flimsy in line of the mountain of proof recited. Sister stepped from the throng, clutching the envelope securely amid the astonished silence, her voice shaking from the severity of her confession. She stated, "There's more." She offered her own proof, which included recordings of private discussions in Kirk Frost. Confessed his worry that telling the truth might alienate Rasheeda and result in text messages from his ex-lover, saying, "I'm frightened she'll leave me if she finds out the truth." As the recording played across the speakers, every pause and accent were exposed for everyone to hear. As the debris cleared, the room looked to be Kirk's head bowed as tears ran down his cheeks in a silent confession, frozen in time as if the air itself was immovable. Rita looked at him with a mixture of her eyes were filled with fury and anguish. "How could you make up something about our child?" She wept. "How could you base your entire existence on falsehoods?" KarlieRedd approached Rasheeda and put out a helping hand. "You are worthy of the truth," she gently said. For a brief time, the two women made an alliance forged in the fire of treaty as Rasheeda grasped the hand. The cameras recorded the connection in their linked hands, creating a poignant image that would come to define the most explosive moment of the season. Another bombshell broke just when it looked that all the secrets. A production assistant handed Rita a sealed package from a private investigator. Rita opened it with nervous fingers and discovered a file with lab receipts, bills, and false virtually single move Kirk Frost had done to organize the scheme was scrupulously recorded. Receipts supported falsified findings. Invoices linked payments to a questionable lab, and signatures matched Kirk's unique handwriting. There was no disputing the facts, as the repercussions of his actions weighted down on him like an overpowering force. Kirk Frost sank to the ground, head in hands. Family, members and friends exchanged astonished and sorrowful faces, with some stepping closer to console Rita and others standing silent. And recognizing that this was television gold, the production crew taking a minute to allow the unvarnished emotion play out in front of their cameras. Rita stood up from the couch and used her shaking hands to wipe her cheeks. Despite being soft, her voice had the resonance of steel as she remarked, "I loved you with all of my heart, but love based on deception isn't love at all." Despite her tears, Kirk Frost glanced up, sorrow and shame mirrored in his eyes, tears flowing down his eyelashes. It seemed like a physical barrier because of KarlieRedd watched from a distance how tight the atmosphere was. Her elation balanced by sympathy. She had chased the truth, but she hadn't expected the human destruction that would follow. Rita's mother spoke forward, her voice shaking with pain and wrath. She rebuked Kirk Frost, saying, "You swore you'd always be honest, but you used deception, even though you committed to protect my daughter this time." Kirk Frost made no attempt to defend himself. Instead, he merely nodded and closed his eyes, his face covered in shame. As the altercation came to a conclusion, the cameras followed every face and documented the ramifications from a betrayal that would have an influence on the next season. Each person was caught in the private implications of public exposure, yet the moment persisted in the heated silence even after producers indicated for a cut. Later, spectators at home would revisit the scenario, dissecting each glance and tremor, and contemplating Kirk's motives, Rasheeda's future, and the hope for restoration. Hanging by the thinnest of threads in that tight living room, where alliances had shifted and trust had been destroyed, Rasheeda stood between loss and resiliency. KarlieRedd carried the mantle of truth-bearer, her campaign accomplished, yet tainted with the pain of an indelibly broken friendship. While Kirk Frost remained sprawled on the floor, a man undone by his own fear and deception. One question remained. As the lights went out and the cameras moved on to the next scene, could a love betrayed this profoundly ever be repaired? The narrative that began with a simple envelope had erupted into a maelstrom of desire, leaving the entire home in a condition following the news. Rita retired to the comfy chair near the window, her arms surrounding herself as if striving to glue the parts of her broken world together. Kirk Frost remained on the floor, his hands clasped firmly over the open gift on the floors, his head lowered. Karlie Redd stayed nearby, her countenance turning from one of triumph to one of anxiety as she studied the two. The cameras continued to film every quiver on Rita's shoulders, every shiver in Kirk's stance, and the oppressive quiet of the room, broken only by the low hum of machinery. Family members and friends exchanged uneasy stares, uncertain of whether to approach or give way. Ever devoted Rita's closest friend unwillingly got up and gave a trembling tissue. She leaned down to Rita and said, "You deserve better." Rita accepted it. Tissue with shaky fingers while continuing to cry. Even the brightest days may end in darkness. When the light outside sank low, slanting through the draperies and casting lengthy shadows on the floor, Karlie Redd attracted attention, softly clearing her throat. "I realize that you're in agony," she commented in a quiet voice, "but you both need to address this." Rita's red-rimmed eyes met. Karlie Redd glanced up. What else could she say? Her voice was hoarse as she questioned with sweaty and beseeching eyes. Kirk Frost raised his head, his voice ragged with he mumbled with despair, "Please help me set this right." His tone as urgency penetrated Rasheeda's agony and sparked a glimpse of conflict within her wounded heart. The cameras suddenly stopped filming as the production team gave the signal for a short break, following the emotional maelstrom. The abrupt quiet was shocking. A producer came along, brought water, and gently asked if the team might go for a moment. Kirk Frost rose up unsteadily and nodded numbly. Rita stayed seated and attempted to control her breathing with quivering hands over the tissue. Karlie Redd remained by her side, and the two women developed an unforeseen bond based on their mutual passion. Kirk Frost spoke to his lifelong confidant who had remained at his side for years in the corridor, and in a voice barely heard above a whisper, he said, "I didn't expect it would go this far. I thought I could manage and control the repercussions." A hand was placed on his shoulder by his pal. She whispered softly, "You underestimated the power of truth. You must now cope with the consequences." Kirk Frost gulped deeply and nodded, becoming with a mixture of sorrow and thrill in her breast. Rita rose up back in the living room, brushed away her tears, and vowed to approach Kirk Frost directly. At that time, the cameras began up again, filming her initial motions in his way. Karlie Redd moved back to make place while keeping a tight eye on the action hip-hop and love fans who were watching live. They held their breath, sensing the narrow line between reunion and ultimate breakup. Rita was standing above Kirk Frost, who was still sitting on the floor with his head down. Her voice was forceful despite its with shakes. She said, "You owe me the explanation of a lifetime." Kirk Frost peered. He looked back at her with sadness in his eyes. "I'm very sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I was terrified." "Rita," I halted him by lifting my hand. "What are you afraid of?" She pushed Kirk Frost. He took a deep breath and collected his resolve. "If I'm not everything you deserve, I'm afraid you'll leave me." Raw and vulnerable. The revelation stayed in the air for a few minutes. Rita's face softened, but the wound remained raw. "You believe I might be protected by a lie," she mumbled. Kirk Frost gulped involuntarily, running down his cheeks. "I figured it would," he said. "But now that I think about it, it truly destroyed us." Rita's tears flowed again, but this time, they were filled with deep grief rather than wrath. She whispered, "I'm not sure if I can trust you again." Every agonizing statement was carefully absorbed by the visitors as the tension echoed throughout the room. Karlie Redd moved up to Rita's side and warm hand on her back. "You deserve honesty regardless of what you decide," she said quietly. Rita nodded, wondering whether she could forgive but conscious that she needed to clear her head before proceeding. Kirk Frost continued to kneel in the hopes of some little amount of redemption, his fists clenched as if in prayer. Receive's cousin quickly entered the room while holding her phone. She exclaimed, "I found anything new." Kirk Frost wrote an email to his lab contact to arrange payment. She exhibited an email trail with bills, timeframes, and amounts. The treachery was heightened by the letter's chilly businesslike tone. Overwhelmed by the degree of his own deception, Kirk Frost fell to his knees, buried his face with his hands with each line like a knife. Rita read the email chain out loud. Payment sent, results to be modified to ensure there are no anomalies. As she completed, her voice cracked. She turned aside, crying violently, her voice flat as she said, "This was all planned." Unable to look her in the eyes, Kirk Frost nodded. The living room resembled a courthouse with a lady he still loved but no longer recognized, giving the verdict. The camera zoomed in. Close-ups of Karlie Redd's steadfast watchfulness, Rita's concerned expression, And Kirk's tearstrage made every viewer feel the gravity of what was happening at the time. Two people whose lives had been interwoven in trust and love were now in risk of irreparably drifting apart. The viewer was left wondering if love could sustain such a terrible betrayal when the producer discreetly intimated that the story will end on this cliffhanger. Rita gave Kirk Frost one more look as the lights went down and the crew prepared to cut. Her eyes were tired but resolute. She commented, Kirk's shoulders quiver with silent sobs as she turned and left him. Karlie Redd followed her example, and Kirk Frost was left alone in the center of the room, surrounded by the debris of his actions as the door slowly closed behind them in a tale of deception, heartbreak, and the constant question of whether truth can ever entirely set people. The television faded to dark, setting the stage for the next amazing event. Kirk Frost was left alone on the floor, holding the envelope with the hilarious DNA findings in his quivering fingers amid the quiet that followed Rasheeda's departure was captured on video, including the hollow echo of his own incredulity, the glint of tears on his cheekbones, and the way his shoulders heaved with each painstaking breath. The hardwood floor was draped in twilight shadows outside the window, as if the daylight itself had run away from the carnage. Within a few seconds, Karlie and her sister were stationed on each side of her as she made her way back to the center of the room. Their features stiffened with purpose. With bloodshot eyes and an almost audible voice, Kirk Frost looked up and added, I know you're right to hate me. Rita's gaze softened just enough to startle him, but she remained as she perched on the couch's arm. She muttered quietly, hate isn't the problem. I need to know why you thought lying was preferable to being honest. Karlie Redd got a tablet out of her backpack and began reading the texts she found. She offered it to Rita, who studied Kirk's words in a small digital font. Don't let the truth destroy our tale. We'll correct it before she finds out, and believe me, you owe it to us. Rita's voice quivered in anguish as she read each paragraph. Out loud, you arranged this, she murmured, her voice stained with tears. Each deception was intentional. Kirk Frost bowed his head. Recoiling in humiliation, he said with harshness, I believed I was protecting you, but I was incorrect. Rita stood up and stepped slowly as the room appeared frigid. Family members and friends went to the edge, uncertain whether to respect her personal space or step in. Kirk Frost struggled to keep up with her, ultimately standing unsteadily and saying, Please allow me to clarify. Rita paused and turned around. Go on, she said in a monotonous manner. Kirk Frost inhaled, mustering. I met someone who was bold enough to share the truth he had kept hidden for so long. Before I met you years ago, he said softly, we took a DNA test, but the conclusions were not conclusive. I was afraid and felt like a liar if I couldn't demonstrate my capacity to be father was my primary focus. Rita examined his face for honesty as the words hang. Kirk Frost took a gulp. And I convinced myself that the moment had come to resurrect that old exam, when we learned regarding our baby. I imagined that if I could just display it, we would be comfortable and pleased, as if our future were. His revelation resonated across the quiet chamber. Interrupted only by Rita's breathing got laborious as a result of the ventilation system. So she, instead of replying to me, she wrapped her arms around herself again and mumbled, You took away our power to decide. Kirk Frost closed his eyes as her words weighed heavy on his chest. He said, I was afraid you would leave me, afraid that you would depart without providing evidence. Rita slowly shook her head and wept. She said, Love isn't proven by papers. Trust is the foundation of it. Karlie Redd went forward, speaking gently. Everyone makes mistakes, she said. However, certain faults establish boundaries that cannot be eliminated. She gave Kirk Frost a short look. You betrayed the lady you promised to remain safe. Kirk Frost nodded while taking shallow breaths. I understood what he said. I'm ready to take on anything comes my way. Rita was silent for a while, stared at Kirk Frost as if weighing every ounce of devotion she had ever had, as if holding her breath. The room became still. She eventually let out a breath and eased herself to the edge of the couch, supported by her arms on her knees. Her voice was broken yet strong as she repeated, I need time. We can't merely return to our former selves. Kirk bent his head and knelt in front of her. He muttered, Take as much. I'll hold out as long as you need. Outside, the studio lights faded somewhat as when the cameras shifted to commercial mode. Behind the scenes, filmmakers murmured over the tape as they prepared the teaser for next week. Rita will have a private discussion with her closest friends and family about whether or not to continue online. Live fans speculated on whether Rasheeda would forgive Kirk Frost. Could this breach save their marriage in a matter of seconds? Hashtag Nixposed Frost Family Crisis and hashtag RASHIDAV Kirk grew famous. Rasheeda sat alone herself in when the feed returned. Her eyes were red with tears but strong with resolve, and she spoke directly into the camera. This isn't only my narrative, it serves as a caution to guard secrets. Destroy the people you care about. Speak out if you detect any warning flags. Allowing fear to bind you to an untruth, her statements hit a chord and moved. Karlie Redd stepped up and nodded encouragingly, reflecting on the chaos that had occurred behind closed doors. Underestimating your power, she noted. Rita mustered a modest, appreciative grin. I'm thankful, murmured Kirk Frost. Remained seated in the shadows in the living room as they all proceeded towards the corridor. The wide-angle cameras showed a guy ripped apart by his own fears, with the envelope of falsehoods at his feet, like a shredded veil. The chilly family sank into a tight silence. A sauce evening arrived. Rita retired to her room, phones turned off, hearts sorrowful, was joined by her sister Kirk Frost, lingered in the living room and read over fan messages, some of which were encouraging, some of which were scathing in their charges of lying. Tears again marred his face as he dropped the phone. His hands. Karlie Redd halted at Kirk's door in the shadowy corridor and sniffed deeply, before softly knocking with a glimmer of surprise in his eyes. Kirk Frost opened it, stepped in quietly, closing the door behind her. Her voice faltered, as she said, I wish things were different. Kirk Frost nodded, his fury mitigated by humiliation. Me too, he whispered to two others, each seeking as they stood in the dim light. Sorrow and truth bonded them in their path forward. While she was downstairs, Rita looked out her window at the sky turning indigo. She remembered the individuals who had arrived together to support Karlie Redd's unshakable loyalty and Kirk's honest apologies. She was aware that forgiveness day by day. The spot where Kirk Frost had previously held her hand in promise was touched. Her fingertips were frail as a spider's web, and the recollection shimmered as the episode ended, with a preview for the following episode. It contained a tense family supper during which Rita's parents would share their perspectives on a surprising turn of events in which a fresh truth was disclosed. And Kirk's quest to reclaim Rasheeda. Faith in the face of tremendous odds was the final picture that spectators saw. Rasheeda, alone in a candlelit chamber, her eyes closed as if in prayer, her form framed by the flicker. As the titles rolled, the screen went from flame and darkness to black. Over the gloomy tones of the music with their emotions pounding, the audience would return the next week to discover if love could sustain such a grave betrayal. And if the Frost family could emerge stronger from the ashes of dishonesty. One thing is certain: when the dust settles on this incredible discovery, no secret remains concealed forever, and the connections of trust may be destroyed with the turn of a falsified page. You've seen Rasheeda's sad road from love to betrayal, Karlie's uncompromising search of the pure truth, and Kirk's frenzied attempts to hide behind a phony DNA report. But this is not where the tale ends. Will Kirk Frost be able to win back Rita's trust, or has he shattered the relationship permanently? With the shadow of dishonesty persist in every gaze and murmur of uncertainty, or will Rasheeda recover from this serious wound and emerge out stronger? Further twists are predicted in the next chapter, including unexpected confessions, whispering alliances, and the high-stakes implications that might fundamentally change everything. Relationships in the Frost household, as allegiances are put to the test, as knowledge surfaces, and the topic of forgiveness looms, you will not want to miss a second. Please press the like button to please let us know that you are enjoying this tale. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss any of the exciting. Please let us know in the comments below if you believe Rita can forgive Kirk Frost or not. Should permanently abandon. What outcome are you pulling for, and whatever hidden revelation shocked you the most? We appreciate. I'd want to hear your thoughts, predictions, and dramatizations of what you think will happen. What happens next? The Frost family's crazy voyage is far from done, so stay tuned. The forthcoming episode will show much more, with cameras rolling and emotions running hotter than ever. Join us as we examine the consequences of this DNA finding by pressing the subscribe button and ringing the bell. How would you respond to notifications if you were Rita? Confront the deception, demand the truth, or simply walk away? Tell us in the comments. Only you have the ability to determine Kirk Frost and Rita's future, which is in jeopardy.